all whole. We're going to not touch a penny from their pockets. That's fundamentally wrong, and the American people know it. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to enter into a colloquy with my Republican colleagues for up to 30 minutes.
Is there objection? Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, first of all, I'd like to say I'm very happy to hear that our Democratic colleagues have agreed to allow us to come back next week and not continue on with the July 4th recess. It's important that we start work on the single greatest issue, the single most important issue facing this nation, and that's our debt and deficit issue. So a couple of minutes ago, I objected to what the leadership wanted us to move to, which was an important debate on Libya, but it is not addressing what we need to address. I mean, the fact of the matter is, in the Senate this year, we've been here 6 months. We haven't passed a budget in that 6 months. As a matter of fact, we haven't passed a budget in the United States Senate for over 2 years. We've missed all the budget deadlines. We should have passed a budget by April 15th. Appropriation bills should have been completed by June 10th. We're simply not addressing the single greatest issue facing this country and the fact that we're bankrupting America. Of the 6 bills that have been, only 6 bills have been passed in the United States Senate that have actually become law. 3 of those were cleaning up last year's business. They were continuing resolutions funding the government when what should have happened a year ago is those bills should have already been passed. And President Obama's budget that he sent over here in January was so unserious that it actually lost 0 to 97 in the United States Senate. Not a single Democrat senator voted for that budget. And we have an awful lot of work to do. Our budget deficit this year, the highest estimate I've heard is about $1.65 trillion. We've incurred over $4 trillion in just the last 3 years. And if anybody in America wants to understand why our economy is in a coma, it is exactly that. People look to Washington and they see how reckless, how out of control our spending is. As a former manufacturer, as somebody who has made investments, has created jobs, I realize when the federal government is spending so much money that it doesn't have, eventually the federal government is going to take. They're going to take in the form of higher taxes, possibly in the form of higher inflation. And the other thing that is overhanging this economy that is really preventing job creation is the overregulation. I cannot tell you how many Wisconsin business people come in to our office and is talking about that regulation or this regulation that one of these agencies are trying to impose on them. And one thing that's kind of interesting about all these regulations, or many of them, is they're not being implemented. Just like the health care law. Over 3 million waivers have been granted. Why is that? I believe it's because this administration actually understands that if they implemented the health care law, if they implemented these regulations, they understand exactly the harmful effect that would have on our economy, the harmful effect that would have on job creation. So the fact of the matter is, what this administration has done, they came into office with a tough situation, no doubt about it. But their actions, the passage of the health care law, the 1,600-page Dodd-Frank financial bill, that has made job creation far harder. They've made the situation far worse. And I think Senator Rand has a few words to say.
Yes, thank you, Senator Johnson. I agree with Senator Johnson. I come down to the floor today in support of this movement. This movement is that we should be talking about what America says we should be talking about, the debt. Now, yesterday, the President went on national television and he chastised Congress. He said to Congress, and I quote, "Members of Congress need to cancel things." Well, you know what? I agree. I'm here today, though, Mr. President. Where are you? My understanding is the President's campaigning, has a fundraiser in Philadelphia tonight. I don't believe he's here tackling the nation's problems today. Well, he could send us the Vice President, but I don't think the Vice President's either here. Also, I think he's in Las Vegas campaigning tonight. So the thing is it's a two-way street. If he's going to go on national television and chastise us not for doing work, we're here saying we want to be working on the nation's problems. We're here saying the nation's debt is a problem. His administration has said the #1 national security threat we face is the debt. Where is the president? Campaigning. We're here, Mr. President, and we will have an offer. We don't want to raise the debt ceiling. We don't want more debt. But you know what? As Republicans, for the good of the country, we're willing to raise the debt. But only, and I repeat, only if we have significant budgetary reform. We have to balance the budget by law, force Congress to do it by changing the Constitution. It's the only way it will ever change. There is a pathology here. The pathology is that we do not have a spine. We are spineless and cannot do what it takes to cut the spending, and only we will get there if we change the Constitution. So, Mr. President, we are here. We are here, and we welcome you to come back to town in between fundraisers and talk about how we would fix this. But we would yes, we will raise the debt ceiling contingent upon a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. 75% of the public is in favor of saying you have to balance your budget. Let's come back and discuss what the American people want. And I commend Senator Johnson for leading this fight, and I think this is just the beginning. But I don't plan on saying we should go to any other subject until we've addressed the debt ceiling.
Well, Senator Rand, I totally agree with you. I believe Senator Rubio has a few words to add.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. Thank you. I, too, yesterday watched the President's lecture on television. Watched it again this morning just to make sure I was well informed before I came here. My reaction is twofold. One, I was disappointed, and the other is I'm alarmed. First, I'm disappointed because America does not have a tradition of class warfare. It's never been part of our nation. In fact, one of the things that distinguishes us from the world is that Americans have never believed that you somehow have to take money away from somebody else in order to be better off. On the contrary, we've always looked to advance the cause of everyone in the belief that we can all be prosperous and in the hopes of growing our economy that way. That's the American tradition. That serves our nation well. Fortunately, you wouldn't know that from the speech yesterday. There a rhetoric that, quite frankly, was deeply disappointing. The idea that if we raise taxes, as the President said, on millionaires and billionaires, raise taxes on oil companies, raise taxes on owners of private jets, that somehow is going to make a difference in America's debt in terms of having a real impact is not only misleading, I think, quite frankly, it's disappointing. It's class warfare, and it's the kind of language that you would expect from a leader of a third-world country, not the President of the United States. But I'm also alarmed and worried about the speech because I think from it you can only take two things. Either the President doesn't truly understand the nature of the problem that we face, or he's decided that this is a political issue and not a policy one. I say he perhaps doesn't understand the nature of the case because, for example, he mentioned the corporate jet tax 6 different times. And yet the impact it would have is so insignificant that the White House, to this very moment, has not even been able to give an estimate of what it means on a dollar figure. Going further, by the way, it's important to note that that exact tax provision was part of the President's now infamous stimulus plan that passed in February of 2009. But the bigger problem, though, is maybe the President fundamentally doesn't understand how jobs are created. Politicians don't create jobs. U.S. senators don't create jobs. Senator Johnson pointed out jobs are created by everyday people from all walks of life that start a business or expand an existing one. And our job here in government is to make it easier for them to do that, not harder. And threatening to raise taxes, threatening to wage class warfare does not accomplish that purpose. Here's what I would suggest to the President. I would suggest that we have done this before as a people in America. Things like a simpler tax code. People around here are in favor of tax reform. A simpler tax code, a manageable and sane regulatory environment, and, of course, a government that doesn't spend money it doesn't have. These things have worked before, and they will work again, and I urge the President to lead us in that direction.
Well, thanks, Senator Rubio. I just want to pick up on one point you made about class warfare. Certainly as a job creator myself for 31, 32 years, I know an awful lot of other entrepreneurs, and I have to point out how incredibly dispiriting it is to have leaders here in Washington attack you day in and day out, demonize you, when all you're trying to do is make a good life for yourself, your family, provide solid employment for other good Americans. So again, I really need to point out class warfare does not work. It does nothing. It does nothing to help improve our economy. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. There is no issue that is more important or more pressing for the American people than this one right now. where we've reached a point where our debt-to-GDP ratio is at about 95%. Our economy can't long endure that kind of borrowing. It has an effect that will result in an estimated loss of about 1 million jobs a year for each year that we remain above the 90% of debt-to-GDP ratio. We simply can't endure that. The American people can't endure it. We need to increase revenues. The only way we're going to increase revenues is to allow the economy to recover. That won't happen as long as we keep borrowing more and more money while doing nothing to control the underlying problem, the systemic problem that requires a structural reform. The American people understandably, justifiably, and very correctly are demanding that before we raise the nation's debt limit yet again, before we extend yet another credit card for the United States of America, we commit to some kind of cuts. Future borrowing requires us to make future cuts. The problem with that is the moment that that debt is actually used up, the moment it's incurred, the American people are under an obligation. But if we make a promise today that we're going to cut, let's say, $2 or $3 or $4 trillion over the next 10 or 12 or 14 or 15 years, that's a promise that we can't make. That's a promise that we can't really commit to. Because this Congress, the one that sits right now, will not be the same Congress that convenes in January of 2013 or on January of 2015 or in future years. We've got to make changes right now. And the only way that we can commit to future cuts, to future structural reforms, the only way we can bind future Congresses is by amending the U.S. Constitution to change the way we spend money, to limit spending as a percentage of GDP, and to require a supermajority to spend more than we have or to raise taxes. That's what we're demanding. We're willing to work. We're willing to come to the table on the debt limit, but we demand some kind of solution that will put us on course towards sanity. That's why we're here.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Ayotte.
I want to thank my colleagues, and I think those of you who are watching this will see that we are new senators back here in the back corner of the Senate, and I can tell you as a new member of this chamber, I'm deeply disappointed by the lack of work that we have been doing here in the United States Senate, and the majority leader has put us in a position where we haven't been focusing on the fiscal crisis that is facing our nation right now. When you look at the fact that it's been 792 days since we've had a budget, and I was so excited as a new member of the Budget Committee to roll up my sleeves and get together to put together a responsible blueprint for this country, yet unfortunately we were told by the majority leader that would be foolish to put together a responsible blueprint for this country and to do the work of the Budget Committee. One of the reasons I came to the United States Senate is, I'm tired of business as usual. I know that my freshman colleagues back here share that, and I'm the mother of 2 children. I know that the President mentioned his children yesterday, but if you care about your children and the future of this country, we owe it to our children to not continue to kick the can down the road. We should be in the United States Senate today and next week talking about how we are going to put together a blueprint that makes sure that we do not continue to borrow from countries like China, that we do not continue to enslave our children with the debt that this country is accumulating. And we know that if we do not address this, that the greatest country in the world will go bankrupt. And I, for one, want to follow through on the promise, the American promise, that we have always made to the next generation, and that is that we would leave them with a better country. And that is so threatened right now with what is happening here in Washington. That's why I share with my colleague, Senator Johnson. I do not believe that we should be addressing anything next week but spending and debt, and we have the debt ceiling vote coming up. So why aren't we rolling up our sleeves right now, Mr. President, and working on a solution with real spending reforms, putting those handcuffs on Congress that we know we need, like a balanced budget amendment, spending caps, a budget for our country so we don't continue to have this continuing resolution situation, one that reduces spending. We do not have a tax problem in this country. We have a spending problem. And we need to create a positive climate for our private sector and really do the hard work here in Washington like our families do and live within our means. So I think next week we should be doing the work that needs to be done. And, you know, Mr. President, you called on us yesterday to work. We are here working. Mr. President, the only blueprint, financial and fiscal blueprint that you have offered, your budget for 2012, did not even get one vote from a member of your party in this chamber. That budget blueprint would have added another $14 trillion to our debt. So I say to our President, we're willing to roll up our sleeves and get to work with you to avert this looming fiscal crisis. But where is your plan that's going to reduce spending and get us on a responsible fiscal path to preserve the greatest country in the world?
Thanks, Senator Ayotte. Senator Vitter.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. I'm honored to join you and all of our colleagues here to echo the same important message. Everyone knows, everyone paying attention across the country knows that our greatest challenge is out-of-control spending and debt. Everyone knows that we face a mounting crisis and an important deadline in terms of the debt limit. And so when are we going to face these crucial issues, the top challenges we face as a country, when are we going to face them squarely, directly, constructively, here on the floor of the U.S. Senate? It's just that simple. Let's get to the important matter at hand. Let's debate in a constructive way. Let's vote on proposals to curb spending and debt. Yesterday, we stood together under Senator Johnson's leadership and said just that. And we said we're going to block any effort to go into a recess or even a pro forma session next week, July 4th recess. And we have done that. We've successfully blocked that recess. And we're going to do it because we need to roll up our sleeves. We need to go to work, not go on vacation, about this crucial challenge of spending and debt. Interestingly, President Obama, in many ways, said the same thing yesterday. And he chastised Congress and said, you need to go to work, not go on vacation, to address this crucial issue. Well, great. We've succeeded in canceling that recess. That's a first important step. But why are we continuing to try to move to every other issue under the sun except the biggest challenge our country faces? Why don't we face this issue, debate it in a constructive way? Senator Reid, why don't you put measures on the floor that directly address this issue? With that in mind, those of us who joined together yesterday to block our July 4th recess have written Senator Reid a letter today. And I think it summarizes our point and our position very clearly, so I'll read it. It's not long. Dear Leader Reid, yesterday we came together to make it clear that we believe the Senate should not go on vacation while our country goes bankrupt. And we vowed to block any recess or pro forma session next week. We're glad you have accepted that reality. But let's not be in session just to try and fool the American people into thinking the Senate is working on the nation's fiscal crisis. Let's actually begin a constructive debate on the biggest challenge our country faces, spending and debt. With that goal, we write to ask a few simple, fundamental questions. When will you put serious bills on the floor to directly address spending and debt? The Budget Act of 1974 requires the Senate Budget Committee to mark up a budget by April 15th. And tomorrow will mark the 793rd day since the Democratic-led Senate has passed a budget and the 11th week since missing that deadline this year. When will the Budget Committee meet to mark up a budget proposal, and when will you put such a proposal on the floor? The American people want us to enact meaningful, effective spending caps. When will you put a spending cap bill on the Senate floor? We clearly need the enforced discipline of a balanced budget constitutional amendment. This measure failed by a single vote last time it was debated on the floor of the U.S. Senate. When will you put a balanced budget amendment on the Senate floor? Senator Reid, we await your response and your leadership. And so again, Mr. President, to summarize, we banded together yesterday and said, as the country goes bankrupt, we shouldn't go on vacation. We're going to block any recess, any pro forma session next week, and we did. But we did it to turn to this challenge, to debate spending and debt in a constructive way, to have votes on that, not to continue to avoid the issue and turn to every other issue under the sun. And so through the chair, I'd again ask Senator Reid, why don't we turn to this most important challenge of our country? Please put serious bills on the Senate floor that directly address spending and debt. Let's get on with the people's work.
Thank you, Senator Vitter. Senator Sessions.
Thank you, Senator Johnson, and thank you for your leadership on this issue. As the ranking Republican on the Budget Committee, I share my colleagues' disappointment that we have not functioned. It's good to see Senator Ayotte and Senator Johnson, who are members of that committee. We worked hard to get prepared some weeks ago on the assumption that the United States Senate would meet its statutorily required duty, and that is to produce a budget. I'm holding up Title II, United States Code, Section 632, and it's the Budget Act, and it requires that the Congress annually produce a budget. We've gone now 792 days, I guess, without a budget. It's the first line of the Act is, on or before April 15th of each year, Congress shall complete action on the concurrent resolution on the budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1st for the next fiscal year. Well, we haven't done that. It also said that we should meet by April 1st. Senator Conrad, our budget chairman, our Democratic chairman, an able, experienced chairman, was prepared to go forward. It's pretty clear to me that the majority leader decided that we shouldn't have a budget process. Last year, the Budget Committee produced a budget out of committee, but the majority leader failed to bring it up for vote in the floor. And as leader, he has the power generally to control that fact and was able to do so. This year, he said it would be foolish to have a budget, and basically we haven't even met in committee to have a budget. So we're facing the most serious, systemic debt crisis in our nation's history. The numbers are so serious, and our path is so unacceptable that it is clearly the #1 issue of our time. The chairman of President Obama's Debt Commission gave us a written statement to the Budget Committee, said this nation has never faced a more predictable economic crisis. When asked when, Erskine Bowles, President Clinton's chief of staff, said it could be 2 years, a little before, a little after. So I guess what I'm saying is that these individuals, particularly the ones that just finished a campaign, traveled all over their state, talked to hundreds of thousands, millions of people in their state, got a feel for it. They are bringing new vitality and new insight into what's happening. And what's happening is nothing. 6 months have gone by, and we've not had any hearings. We've had not any votes on the floor. We haven't seen any legislation. So I think that this is an unacceptable method. I think it undermines the classic constitutional duty of Congress to appropriate money, deal with taxes. It's our responsibility, and we have to ultimately be responsible for it. But have you observed mayors who say, I'm not going to present a budget to City Council, I'm going to let them decide? Do you see governors not present budgets to the state legislatures and then fight for what they believe in? Look what's happening with Governor Christie, Governor Cuomo in New York, Governor Brown in California, Governor Bentley in Alabama. It really helps to have that one single person elected to represent everybody provide some impetus. And it's astounding to me that we haven't seen that from the majority leader in the Senate and from the president. He submitted a budget but then backed away from it, and it went down 97-0 in the floor just a few weeks ago, but it was never seriously considered. So what is we going to do? We're heading to a time where we may be asked within a few hours to vote on a monumental multi-trillion-dollar deal to raise the debt limit of the United States, and what will be in it? Will we really be changing the trajectory of our nation, or will it be business as usual? We're not going to have time to review it. That should be on the floor now. People should be standing up and casting votes right now. How much taxes do you want to increase? Do you? Which ones? How much do you want to cut? Sessions? Where? Let's have the vote out here. That's what we should be doing. I think it'll help the American people understand how serious our fix is, what it's going to take to get out of it. It's much more serious, and our problem is greater than most people realize. So I thank my colleagues for their good comments and the enthusiasm they've brought and the passion they brought to this critical issue.
Well, thank you, Senator Sessions. I will point out that business as usual here in Washington is bankrupting America. Senator DeMint.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. I'm glad our Republican freshmen did not get the memo that they were supposed to be seen but not heard. It's really exciting for this old, dusty establishment when the people who just walked in the door are the ones who are leading it, and so I thank all of the freshmen who are sitting here. Washington is addicted to spending, and the addict-in-chief is President Obama. He's promised many times to quit spending, to live within our means, but he keeps falling off the wagon. And now for the fourth time since he's been president, he's asking Congress to refill the bottle so that he can keep spending and keep borrowing and keep increasing America's debt. Members of Congress, the Senate, often brag about the fact that we have the power of the purse. Part of that power is to pass laws to limit how much the administration can borrow. It's been a tradition. But both parties over the years have consistently blown through that legal debt limit and increased it whenever we wanted another drink. The debt limit is supposed to be a stop sign to stop the administration from spending more than we can afford as a nation. Instead, they've turned it into a green light where we can just speed through and continue to pour more and more debt onto our children. But now we've gone from it being just a wink and a nod where we brag about how much bacon we take home to we're at the point where we could seriously lose our nation. I think Americans sense that everywhere. Congressmen and politicians constantly exaggerate and cry wolf. But I think there's a sense all across America that goes beyond partisanship to real worry. That's what I hear everywhere I go. People somehow intuitively know that if we have debt almost the size of our economy and projecting to even double that over the next 10 years, that what they see on TV in Greece and around the world of countries literally coming unglued could very well happen much quicker than we think here in the United States. We've got over $14 trillion in debt. We know the President's not serious about quitting this spending binge because the budget he sent us practically doubles that. And as we've gone through these last few months of talking about raising the debt limit once again, we have not gotten one proposal from the President to deal with this issue. He's played dozens of rounds of golf and had many, many fundraisers around the country, but he has been AWOL on this issue. So not only has he added over $3 trillion of debt since he became president, he's been missing in action when it comes to actually dealing with it. And his condescending speech yesterday that told Congress to solve the problem ignored the fact that he was elected as president to lead. And yet he's not even following when it comes to this issue. We do have a spending addiction, and the only way that we're going to stop this and keep our country from going over the cliff is if we have a constitutional requirement that we have to stop spending more than we're borrowing. Now, outside of Washington, that doesn't sound like an extraordinary thing to say, but here, last week, one of the Democrat senators called me extreme for suggesting that we needed to balance our budget. American families have to do it, businesses have to do it, 49 states have to do it, and sometimes it's painful. But we don't have to do it here. And the reason we have an unlimited government is that we have unlimited spending here in Congress. We're at a point where we have to make a decision. We've obligated ourselves to borrow more money. We really don't have a good choice at this point. But if we're going to give the President more money to spend to meet obligations that he's already made, we have to make sure that this is the end of this spending addiction. And the only way for that to happen is if we in Congress give the people of the United States and the 50 states the opportunity to decide for themselves if they want their federal government to have a balanced budget. And that's what our condition is. We'll help the President deal with this debt ceiling. But he is going to have to agree with us, and so will the Democrat Party, that we're going to send to the states a balanced budget amendment that the states can ratify. And 5 years after they ratify it, this federal government must be in balance. If we can't do that, if we can't make that commitment to the American people that we're going to stop this addiction, stop bankrupting our country, then we're going to have to go through the pain that we've caused ourselves along with this President when we don't raise that debt limit. We need the help of Americans today because the people in Congress do not have the willpower to do what I just said. We need millions of Americans to call us and email us and tell the President and tell members of Congress that this debt limit should not be raised again ever unless we permanently solve this problem for the American people.
The Senator has used the 30 minutes of the colloquy.
I ask unanimous consent for 2 more minutes.
Seeing here no objection, 2 minutes is granted.
This is very little to ask this Congress to do, to agree within the next 6 or 8 years to do the hard work to balance our budget in return for giving the President more authority to borrow more money. We owe it to the American people to let them decide for themselves. Let the states ratify it. This is a huge decision, and all we're asking our Democrat colleagues to do is to let America decide if we should have a balanced budget. Let America decide if it's really a radical, extreme idea that we live within our means and stop spending more than we're bringing in. I know how America is going to answer that question, and that's why I want to give them the chance to answer it. Mr. President, you've got the money you need to meet our obligations. But once and for all, we need to mean what we say and stop spending this country into bankruptcy. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Mint, for your leadership on this issue. It is the most important issue facing this nation. I want to thank my colleagues for joining me here for the leadership they've shown as well. So with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for recognizing me. I'm pleased to be here today with my senior senator from Colorado to talk about these important issues. And the first thing I wanted to talk about was the debt ceiling itself, because people at home are asking me constantly, Michael, what in the world is going on back there? We're dealing with our budget at the local level. We're dealing with our budget at the state level. We're making choices that aren't popular and that aren't easy to make, but we're moving ahead. We're making decisions in our businesses and we're making decisions at home. We're moving ahead. What's wrong with Washington, D.C.? Part of the problem in this place is that people aren't just entitled, it seems, to their own opinions. They're also entitled to their own set of facts. And I think when you're getting paid by the taxpayer, you have an obligation to actually not play with your own set of facts, but to come out here and and say, you know, what the facts really are. And what the facts really are on the debt ceiling and the vote is that this is not a case of deciding you're sitting at the kitchen table and you're spending too much and so you're going to cut up your credit card. I would be for that. That's not what we're talking about here. These are about bills that have already been incurred by the United States. These are debts that are already owed by the United States. So what this is about is not cutting up your credit card. It's about sitting at home and saying, you know what, I didn't budget very well last month. I didn't budget very well last year. And so even though I watched cable happily all year long, I'm not going to pay my cable bill this month. I'm just not going to do it. Even though I lived in this house all year, I'm not going to make my mortgage payment this month. I'm just not going to do it. That's not fiscally responsible for a family to do, and it's not fiscally responsible for the federal government to do. At home, if you do that, what you discover is that your mortgage rate goes through the roof because the bank says to you, hey, Michael Bennett, you didn't pay your mortgage last month. And I'm not going to lend you money on the same terms that I lent you money before because you are a lousy risk. That is exactly what this is about. It's not about new money. And I think it's important for everybody to understand that because if we don't raise the debt limit and we say to the creditors of the United States, you're not getting paid, not to mention our veterans and our seniors and the men and women that are fighting in Afghanistan, but to our bondholders, you're not going to get paid, they're going to raise our interest rates. And every percentage increase in our interest rate is going to drive us $1.3 trillion more into debt. So there are people coming out here saying it's the fiscally responsible thing to do not to raise the debt ceiling when we're going to have $1.3 trillion more of debt to pay and the interest on that debt and nothing to show for it. Now, it's not surprising to me that Washington being Washington, that there are people that see this as an opportunity to create leverage over things, to have a negotiation about the direction of this country, and I understand that. I understand that. I felt for a very long time that we've got to get a hold of our deficit and our debt. We have a $1.5 trillion deficit. We've got almost $15 trillion of debt on our balance sheet. And I think we have a moral obligation not to constrain the choices of our kids and our grandkids. I've got 3 kids of my own that are 11, 10, and 6. One of them heard me say that during a town hall meeting, and she followed me out to the sidewalk. And she said, Daddy, I said, what? This is Caroline, the oldest. I said, what? She said, just to be clear. She was making fun of me, Mr. President, because I use that expression sometimes. She said, just to be clear, I'm not paying that back. Which is the right attitude for her to have. And we need to be advocates for Caroline Bennett and all the kids that are living across this country. Not just to be fiscally responsible, which we need to be, not just asking what we're going to cut, which we need to do, but also prioritizing what we're spending to make sure that we are maintaining the American dream, to make sure that we're honoring the legacy of our parents and grandparents and their parents and grandparents, and honoring our national creed, that it's our job, not as senators, but as Americans, to provide more opportunity, not less, to the people that are coming after us. And the debt and the deficit is a huge piece of that. But you know what? It's not the only thing. I lay awake at night worrying about the fact that if you're poor in this country, it's hard for you to get a decent education. If you're born into a zip code that's defined by poverty in the United States, your chances of graduating with a college degree in the 21st century in the greatest country in the world are 9 in 100. That means 91 of you are consigned to a future where you can't participate meaningfully in the democracy, you can't participate meaningfully in this economy. We need to deal with that. The fact that we have an economy that's not generating jobs, where median family income for the first time in our history, Mr. President, is falling, not rising. People coming to my town hall meetings and saying, I've done everything that I could do over the last decade, but I'm earning less at the end than I was at the beginning. And saying to me, you know, Michael, we sent our first kid to the fancy school, but we're not going to be able to send our second kid there. Or we can't send our kid to the best college that they got into. We need to be working on that. We have an energy policy in this country right now, or maybe it's better to say a lack of an energy policy in this country right now, that forces us to ship billions of dollars a week of our treasure to the Persian Gulf to buy oil. That doesn't make any sense. I was on a call last week with farmers from my state that were saying to me they are being driven out of business by the broken immigration policy that we have. Now, I think that people at home are sick and tired of the screaming match. I think that people at home are sick and tired of the partisanship. I believe that people don't think it's going to address these issues. And I think they look at this deficit and debt situation and they say to themselves, this is such a reflection of incompetence that we are fearful to have a conversation about all the other things that we have to do for our kids and for our grandkids. Their standard of what they want us to do is extremely clear to me. And the senior senator and I are from the most beautiful state in the country, but we're also proud of the fact that it's a third Democratic, a third Republican, and a third independent. And what I've taken out of the town hall meetings I've had is this. They want us to materially address this problem. They don't believe we're going to fix it all at once, and unfortunately they're right about that, but they want us to materially address it. They want to know that we're all in it together, that everybody has some role to play in helping preserve choice and options for the next generation of Americans, and to make sure that business understands that we're going to be good on the accounts that we have. That's not Washington speak, though. That's Colorado speak. It's tougher around here. And they want it to be bipartisan, because they don't believe in either party's go-it-alone approach on this question. And I would add a corollary to all of that, which is that the capital markets need to be reassured that their paper is going to be worth what they've paid for it. We need a comprehensive approach here. It's an approach that's going to require us to cut discretionary spending. It's an approach that's going to require us to reform our entitlement systems. It's going to be an approach that's going to require us to do real tax reform in this place. And we're not great here at walking and chewing gum at the same time, but that's what we need to start doing. These are comprehensive and complicated questions. No one would rather vote on something than I would that didn't raise any taxes. But the math doesn't work. And it's clear that at the end of the day, for us to move ahead, we're going to have an agreement that has all of those aspects in it. Discretionary spending cuts, entitlement reform, and tax reform. That's why when Senator Johans and I, a Republican here, circulated a letter to the President that had those three elements in it, 32 Democrats and 32 Republicans signed the letter, agreeing that all of these elements, the President and the Senate signed the letter, agreeing that all of these elements were going to be part of a final product here. So what I wanted to do this afternoon was simply implore all of us to do our jobs, to get this behind us, to begin the building of America again in the 21st century, to make sure that we are not the first generation of Americans to leave less opportunity, not more, to our kids and our grandkids. There's a lot more agreement behind closed doors in this place than there is out on the floor. We need to bring some of that agreement out here, because if we fail to reach some conclusion before this debt limit vote, and we unintentionally or intentionally end up in a place where we've turned our back on the debts that we owe, we're not going to be able to solve this problem. The choices are going to make these look like easy choices. And so we're going home for a few days this weekend, Senior Senator and I, to celebrate the 4th of July, Independence Day, to spend some time with our families and friends and our neighbors. And then we're coming back next week, and my hope is that everybody comes back, everybody, on both sides, with more of a seriousness of purpose than we've had, with an ability to see not just political benefit, but the benefit to the country of coming to agreement. If I can go home and say to people that we have reached a deal that meets the terms that I mentioned earlier, my view is that that would be perfectly fine in Democratic parts of the state and in Republican parts of the state. And that's what we should strive to do. I hope the American people will hold the people in this chamber accountable in the way they hold people at the local level and the state level accountable. No mayor would ever say, I'm going to willingly or wantonly jeopardize the credit rating of my city. The President of the Senate was the mayor, and live to fight another day. And we shouldn't do that either. So I hope we move past the rhetoric of this debt ceiling discussion and actually into a conversation that will solve the fundamental problems and challenges that are facing our country. Because if we don't do that, we're not going to be able to do the even more important work than that, which is to support the aspirations that all of us have for this country and for our children in a world that is becoming more complex and uncertain every single day. So I thank the senior senator from Colorado for his incredible leadership on these issues, and I believe that if we just continue to try to reach out and continue to try to work together, that ultimately we're going to find a path. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
President.
Senator from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to acknowledge the leadership of my colleague from Colorado, and particularly underline the salient points that he made during his remarks. I think most important to note about Colorado is we are a third Republican, a third Democratic, and a third Independent in our political and electoral makeup, and I think it drives us to find bipartisan solutions and bipartisan ground. And that's why we came to the floor this afternoon, was to in the hope that our colleagues from both sides of the aisle would join us in the discussion about how we move forward, not just on lifting the debt ceiling for the reasons that Senator Bennett outlined, but for the reasons that we think are as follows. We will lay a new foundation for our 21st century economy. We will send a message to the markets and to the business community that we're serious about dealing with our annual deficits and our long-term debt. And I think, in effect, in doing such, we will inject a healthy dose of confidence into our country, into our markets, and into our business community. And that will, in that, taking those steps, this will be a way of moving forward, as Senator Bennett said. I'd ask unanimous consent to enter into a colloquy with my colleague, Senator Bennett.
Without objection.
Senator Udall, one of the things that you said that it just reminded me of a conversation I had a number of months ago with somebody who's in the capital markets and who watches everything going on down here pretty closely but quizzically. Like he can't figure out what in the world we're doing. And I saw him, I think it was maybe in February sometime, somewhere in that time frame, and I asked him, as I always do, what are you doing? Because he's one of the smartest investors that I know. And he said, I'm buying gold. And I said, why are you buying gold? And he said, because I don't have any confidence that you guys are going to be able to work this out and get our deficit and debt under control. First of all, think about how unproductive that is. I'm not telling people to buy or sell gold, but it doesn't create jobs in this economy. What we want people is investing in companies so they can grow and hire people and create jobs. Anyway, I saw him again about 6 weeks ago, and we started talking about the debt ceiling conversation. And he said, it is beyond the realm of my comprehension that you guys would fail to lift the debt ceiling. Now, here's a guy cynical enough about the way this place works who is saying he's buying gold, but it's even beyond his comprehension that we could fail to lift the debt ceiling. And the reason for that is he actually understands what the facts are around this. But I think we will lift the debt ceiling. I certainly hope we will. But the more important point is what the senator has been working on for all these many months, which is coming to a comprehensive plan that actually addresses the underlying problem of our debt and our deficit. So I thank the senator.
My colleague and I, Mr. President, hosted the Capitol Conference, Colorado Capitol Conference 2 weeks ago. And we had Coloradans from all sections of the state, all walks of life. We had the three main political points of view represented, Democrats, Independents, Republicans. And they remarked to you, I know, Senator Bennett, and to me as well, after hearing from a broad range of our colleagues who were gracious enough to take time to speak to our constituents and answer questions, that we all identified the problem and we all had identified the solution, which was a comprehensive plan that we implemented together. And we're here again on the floor this afternoon to call on all of our colleagues to join us in working together to finding that common ground, because there's a lot at stake, but there's enormous opportunity. My colleague Nosetti's was a successful businesman in one of his previous lives.
Yeah.
But you may want to comment on the Capitol Conference as well.
Yeah, it is clear to me that if this decision were being left up to 100 Coloradans, we'd scratch our head and we'd probably argue out some things. But I think it would take about a day for us to come to a set of solutions that would solve the problem, or at least move us down the road. And we'd feel pretty patriotic about what we had done, that we had done something useful for our kids. And at the end of this process, if we're able to deliver something like that, I think that's how we ought to feel. There are too many days around this place where I think we feel like we've lost sight of all of that. And, in that conversation that you're talking about, that Al Simpson was such a big part of, Gary Hart was there, Alice Rivlin, a number of people, it was abundantly clear, blindingly obvious to the people in that room that you couldn't approach this problem by drawing bright lines and saying, no, you can't touch this, or no, you can't touch that. They knew everybody's going to have to give a little bit here in order to make this work. And unfortunately, some of that line drawing is what we're seeing around here that we've got to find a way to get past.
The Senator would yield. I would comment on two elements of what my colleague just alluded to. Let's talk about Social Security. There are those in our party that have said, keep your hands off Social Security. Senator Bennett and I know what a strong and important program Social Security has been. It's allowed me and my wife to raise our children, knowing my parents were treated with dignity in their latter years. They also had the assurances of Medicare. But if you think because Social Security on paper is solvent, you ought to think again, because there's $3 trillion owed to the Social Security Trust Fund by the federal government. And yes, Social Security isn't responsible for that shortfall because we've taken those dollars and put them into the general fund. But that $3 trillion is going to have to come from somewhere. There's some common sense fixes that we can put in place now that would protect and preserve and strengthen Social Security. On the other hand, we hear in the chamber that tax revenues, I should say more appropriately, are off the table. Well, every economist and every observer points out that you can't get there from here, there being a balanced federal budget without additional revenues. Why can't we start, as the Bowles-Simpson Commission proposed, eliminating many of the subsidies and loopholes and special deals in our tax code that total something over $1 trillion? That's a great place to start. If you follow that with tax reform, lowering rates, particularly for corporations and businesses, that's an even bigger step that we could take. And I think there's broad agreement in the chamber, at least certainly in our conversations, with people from across the country who represent their states here. Those are some common sense steps forward.
Well, I completely agree, and why we wouldn't want to look at our tax code and our regulatory code. I hear about that from the other side, and I share their view. I've been in government. I've been on the listen. I was a school superintendent for almost 4 years. If you think I don't understand what it's like to be on the receiving end of well-intentioned legislation from Washington, D.C., that by the time it gets to a school or a classroom makes no sense at all, believe me, I lived it every single day. And so why wouldn't we look at our tax code and our regulatory code and ask ourselves, are these things more or less likely to drive innovation in the United States? Are they more or less likely these aspects of it to grow our economy and to create jobs. And, you know, it's clear that we have the highest corporate tax rate in the world now. It used to be second, but Japan either changed theirs or is about to change theirs. And that's sending a very uncompetitive message to the world. On the other hand, we have so many loopholes, so many special interest loopholes that underlie the tax code that we're not actually getting the revenue that we would be suggested at its high rate. So in a way, this isn't a partisan issue. But it is the worst of all possible worlds because we're sending out an anti-competitive message to the world that says we're closed for business. And we have a whole bunch of loopholes that may or may not, and I suspect in many cases do not, drive innovation here in this country. In fact, most of them are looking backward into the 20th century. They may have made sense in the middle of the 20th century, but they don't necessarily make sense to build new industries here, to develop things like a new energy economy that's so important to our state, which, by the way, would help lead us toward energy independence from the Persian Gulf. I mean, there's no reason to think that all these things that have been, you know, written down are written in stone, and frankly, our job is to make sure that it's working better for people. So I think the Debt and Deficit Commission made some excellent recommendations on that side of things. The other side is on personal income tax. You know, what they said there was, hey, we could actually lower rates and raise more revenue. Yeah. Why? Because there are so many deductions that are part of the code, and, you know, only 30% of the people in this country itemize, get the benefit of those deductions. You can imagine a world where everybody gets the benefit of a lower rate, but we're able to have revenue to drive us forward. We can get there. You know, the thing on the Debt and Deficit Commission is that Tom Coburn, who's one of the most conservative members of this body, I don't think he'd mind my saying that, and Dick Durbin, one of the most liberal members of this body, both voted for that Deficit and Debt Commission report. That's almost good enough for me. That's almost good enough for me.
I was proud of the Senate when 5 of the 6 senators on the commission voted for the Bowles-Simpson recommendations, not without some concerns, not without an interest in working to fill in and flesh out the plan. But 5 of the 6 senators from across the political spectrum said this is a very good starting point.
And yeah, and I see we're joined by Senator Coons from Delaware, and I'm going to stop. But, you know, just along that line, just to give people some optimism that are here today in the chamber or that might be watching, just 2 weeks ago we took a vote on one subsidy, an ethanol subsidy, and I think it was Senator Coburn and Senator Feinstein who put it on the floor, a Democrat and a Republican, and it got like 73 votes. I get in trouble with my kids. Always said that it wasn't like 73 votes. It was 73 votes to end that subsidy. So and by the way, there were, I think, around 40 Democrats and 30-some Republicans that supported that. We need more of that around here. And I think if we keep working at it, keep chipping away at it, we're going to be able to see that, in the end, common sense will actually prevail over politics.
Senator Coons, would you care to share your thoughts with the
Mr. President, the 2 senators from Colorado have, I think, inspired me to come to the floor and join them in a colloquy about the challenges facing our country. And to the senators from Colorado, I am pleased and impressed with their leadership and have greatly enjoyed serving with them to date. I agree that the vote on one of our tax expenditures, on the ethanol subsidy, was an encouraging and inspiring moment because we saw both Democrats and Republicans from all over the country casting a vote to end a tax expenditure, a subsidy, that many would argue has outlived its usefulness in the current marketplace. In my home state, we recently saw the bankruptcy of our second largest poultry company, and they have communicated to me their grave concern about the ethanol subsidy. There's lots of folks on both sides of that particular debate. I think the larger point that's important for us to get to is certainty in the markets. I spent a number of years in the private sector and business before running for and being elected to office. And I know the mantra that Senator Bennett's well familiar with, Senator Udall's well familiar with, many of our colleagues, both parties are familiar with, is that certainty is what the markets look for. Certainty is also what our people look for. And I think we have alarmed them, concerned them by not being able to reach a broad, bipartisan, responsible plan that lays out a framework for how it is we're going to address both the nation's record deficits and record debt. Our debt today, as you know, is roughly $14 trillion. Our deficit has hit an all-time record, and we're working on borrowed time. I've heard some suggest that we need to better understand the situation we're in. The situation we're in, I believe, is that we are about to risk defaulting on America's mortgage. We've made commitments as a nation. We've expended ourselves at home and abroad in a lot of different ways, and I'm worried that we are on the verge of failing to meet our commitments. Just as America's households really hesitate before ever defaulting on their mortgage, I think we as a nation, as a people, have to hesitate, have to think deeply about the consequences of it. I asked the folks who work with me on economic policy to quantify it. They looked at a number of different studies around the country and gave me some just chilling numbers. Should we fail to meet the August 2nd deadline that Secretary Geithner has repeatedly, since January, in writing and in testimony, suggested to us is the absolute last date by which we can reach a bipartisan compromise and a path forward, we'll lose hundreds of thousands of jobs. One study said 640,000 jobs. The markets may lose as much as 10% of their value, which would mean a loss of almost $1 trillion of market equity value. That means that pension funds, 401ks, personal savings would take an enormous hit. The average homeowner would see an increase in the costs of whether it's their credit cards or their mortgages, whether it's their car loans. It's easy to think that this is an abstract argument. But in reality, I think the problem that we're causing, the lack of confidence in the markets, could have a sudden, sharp, grinding effect on our economic world. And that's because investors act more like animals than they do like machines. And when spooked, they act the way herds do, and they run off in a certain direction. And my concern is that we are so used as a country to having a AAA bond rating, to being the world's reserve currency, to being the gold standard for the most safe and most secure investment. I'm gravely concerned that intransigence, that an unwillingness to come to a reasonable compromise is putting us at real risk of spooking the markets, of harming the average American homeowner, and of putting our rating at risk as a country. At the end of the day, I've observed some things about how Washington works so far in my short 6 months here that really worry me. If I could offer a metaphor, it seems to me there's a lot of sacred cows here. It seems to me that the trillions of dollars that we spend in our tax code through tax loopholes and special tax provisions, and the trillions that we spend through direct spending are broken up into these sacred cows. And I feel as if I've gone into dairy. I feel as if I'm surrounded by a whole herd of sacred cows, and that what we need is a deliberate and clear-eyed bipartisan effort to thin the herd here, to make some tough choices. And as I know the Senator Bennett said previously, I want to commend the hard work of the Gang of Six, the so-called Gang of Six, the bipartisan group that came up with both processes and a path forward. The Bowles-Simpson Commission that presented to those of us on the Budget Committee and presented to this body in writing a proposal. There are paths forward. There are ways to make these tough choices. I just hope that before the time runs out, that this body will embrace these proposals, make the tough choices and the sacrifices we need to, come to the center and lay out a path. I frankly don't think we've gotten till August 2nd. I think if we're going to put at risk the markets by injecting uncertainty, I think frankly the timeline may be more like the middle of July. And it's my hope, Mr. President, that the senators from Colorado will be joined by senators from both sides of this body and both sides of this Capitol in crafting a responsible bipartisan solution.
The Senator